Make sure to subscribe for your daily dose of fear, and don't forget to hit the like button and leave a comment about your favorite part of today's story. Want even more exclusive scares? Join our membership for members-only live streams and stories you won't find anywhere else. Your next nightmare awaits. Let's get into it. During a summer that promised adventure and bonding, Julia and her family set out on an RV trip to the breathtaking Shasta Trinity National Forest. The plan was simple: escape the hustle and bustle of daily life, reconnect as a family, and immerse themselves in the beauty of nature. As they drove through the winding roads, laughter filled the RV, and the excitement was palpable. Julia, a spirited teenager, looked forward to hiking, fishing, and sharing stories around the campfire. The family had envisioned evenings filled with warmth, marshmallows roasting over the flames, and the sound of crickets serenading them under a starlit sky. However, as they settled into their campsite, the atmosphere began to shift, and what started as a bonding experience gradually morphed into something unsettling. The first night, after a hearty dinner and a few rounds of card games, Julia noticed an unusual stillness enveloping the forest. The chirping of crickets seemed to fade, replaced by an eerie silence that hung in the air. Dismissing it as a figment of her imagination, she shrugged it off and joined her family around the campfire. As they shared stories and laughter, Julia felt a sense of comfort, but that comfort was short-lived. As darkness deepened, strange occurrences began to unfold. Julia heard faint whispers drifting through the trees, barely audible, yet undeniably present. She glanced at her family, who were engrossed in their conversation, seemingly oblivious to the unsettling sounds that surrounded them. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind, and a chill crept down her spine. The following day, Julia and her family set out for a hike, hoping to shake off the strange feelings from the previous night. The forest was stunning, with towering trees and vibrant wildflowers, but Julia couldn't shake the sense of being watched. As they ventured deeper into the woods, she caught glimpses of movement in the periphery of her vision, but whenever she turned to look, nothing was there. The whispers returned, more pronounced this time, weaving through the trees like a haunting melody. Julia's heart raced as she tried to focus on her family, but the feeling of dread was growing stronger. It was as if the forest itself was alive, and it didn't want them there. That night, as they gathered around the campfire once more, Julia's unease reached a boiling point. The whispers had escalated into distinct voices, calling her name in a chilling, almost pleading tone. She felt a cold breeze sweep through the campsite, extinguishing the flames momentarily, plunging them into darkness. Panic set in as Julia's family exchanged worried glances, their earlier joviality replaced by confusion and concern. Julia's father attempted to reassure everyone, attributing the whispers to the wind and the sounds of wildlife. But Julia knew deep down that something was amiss. The atmosphere had shifted from one of bonding to one of fear, and she could sense her family's growing anxiety. As the days passed, the occurrences became more bizarre. Julia began to experience vivid nightmares, each one more disturbing than the last. In her dreams, she saw a tall, gaunt figure lurking in the shadows, its eyes glowing with an otherworldly light. It was a Wendigo, a creature from Native American folklore, said to embody insatiable hunger and the spirit of the forest. The dreams felt so real that Julia often woke up in a cold sweat, her heart racing, convinced that the creature was watching her from the darkness outside their RV. She shared her fears with her family, but they dismissed her concerns, attributing her nightmares to the stress of being in an unfamiliar environment. However, Julia's mother began to notice the change in her daughter. The once vibrant and cheerful girl was now withdrawn and anxious. The isolation of the forest, combined with the unknown presence that seemed to haunt them, took a toll on Julia's mental state. She felt trapped, both physically in the vast wilderness and psychologically in her own mind. The Julia's family, still trying to maintain a sense of normalcy, planned a fishing trip the next day, hoping to lift Julia's spirits. But as they prepared to leave, Julia felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over her. On the fishing trip, the atmosphere was tense. Julia's father tried to engage everyone in conversation, but Julia could hardly focus on anything other than the feeling of being watched. The whispers had transformed into a cacophony of voices, each one more frantic than the last. She could hear them calling her name, begging her to come closer, to join them in the depths of the forest. It was as if the very trees were alive, whispering secrets that only she could hear. Julia's heart raced as she caught sight of a shadowy figure lurking among the trees, its elongated limbs and hollow eyes sending her into a panic. She screamed, causing her family to turn in alarm, but when they looked, there was nothing there. The psychological impact of the isolation and the unknown began to unravel Julia's family dynamic. Her parents, once supportive and loving, now seemed distant and preoccupied, struggling to understand the fear that had taken hold of their daughter. Julia felt increasingly isolated, trapped in a world where her fears were dismissed as mere imagination. The bond they had hoped to strengthen during this trip was fraying, replaced by an undercurrent of tension and anxiety. Julia's mother, sensing the growing rift, tried to comfort her, but the words felt hollow. The forest, once a place of beauty and adventure, had transformed into a realm of nightmares, and Julia felt as if she were losing her grip on reality. As the final night approached, Julia's fear reached its peak. The whispers had become deafening, echoing in her mind, urging her to leave the campsite and venture into the woods. She could feel the presence of the Wendigo, lurking just beyond the trees, waiting for her to succumb to the darkness. Julia's family gathered around the campfire one last time, but the warmth of the flames did little to dispel the chill that had settled in Julia's bones. She could see the worry etched on her parents' faces, and for the first time, she felt a flicker of hope that they might finally understand her fear. But as the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, drowning out her family's voices. Julia felt an overwhelming urge to escape, to run into the forest and confront the entity that had haunted her for days. In a moment of desperation, she stood up, her heart pounding, and took a step toward the trees. Her family called out to her, panic rising in their voices. But Julia was entranced by the whispers, drawn to the darkness that beckoned her. Just as she was about to cross the threshold, her father grabbed her arm, pulling her back with a strength she hadn't expected. The moment broke the spell, and Julia collapsed into her father's embrace, sobbing uncontrollably. In that moment, the family realized the depth of Julia's fear and the psychological toll the experience had taken on her. They huddled together, seeking comfort in each other's presence, and for the first time, they acknowledged the darkness that had seeped into their trip. The Wendigo, a symbol of their fears and isolation, loomed large in their minds. But they understood that they were stronger together. As they sat around the campfire, the whispers faded into the night, replaced by the sound of their united breaths. They vowed to leave the forest at dawn, to return to the safety of their home and the warmth of their family bond. The experience had changed them, but it also brought them closer, reminding them of the importance of facing fears together. Henry had always found solace in the great outdoors, a refuge from the chaos of life. After the recent loss of his wife, he felt an overwhelming need to escape the suffocating weight of grief that had settled over him like a heavy fog. In an attempt to find clarity and perhaps a semblance of peace, he decided to embark on a solo RV trip to Devil's Gate, a remote area known for its stunning landscapes and eerie legends. The journey was meant to be a healing experience, a chance to reconnect with nature and reflect on the memories of his beloved partner. However, as he drove deeper into the wilderness, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to arrive. As Henry parked the RV and stepped outside, he was greeted by the haunting beauty of Devil's Gate. Towering cliffs loomed overhead, casting long shadows that danced in the fading light. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, but there was an unsettling stillness that surrounded him. It was as if the forest was alive, watching him with unseen eyes. He set up camp, trying to focus on the tasks at hand, unpacking his gear, preparing a simple meal, and lighting a fire. Yet, every crackle of the flames seemed to echo his loneliness, amplifying the ache in his heart. Memories of his wife flooded his mind, and he found himself lost in thought, reminiscing about their shared adventures in nature, the laughter, and the warmth of her presence. As night fell, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The once comforting sounds of the forest transformed into an eerie symphony of whispers and rustling leaves. Henry sat by the fire, trying to shake off the feeling of unease that crept over him. The shadows cast by the flames flickered ominously, and he could have sworn he saw figures moving just beyond the reach of the light. Dismissing it as a trick of his mind, he forced himself to focus on the stars twinkling above, a reminder of the beauty that still existed in the world. But the whispers grew louder, weaving through the trees like a chilling breeze, and Henry felt a shiver run down his spine. As he lay in the RV that night, sleep eluded him. The whispers morphed into distinct voices, echoing his own thoughts of loss and despair. "You shouldn't be here," they seemed to say, taunting him. "You can't escape your grief." The darkness pressed in around him, and he felt the weight of his sorrow more acutely than ever. It was as if the forest was a reflection of his inner turmoil, amplifying his pain and drawing him deeper into despair. He closed his eyes, desperate for rest, but the shadows danced behind his eyelids, and the whispers continued to haunt him. The following day, Henry decided to explore the surrounding area, hoping that a hike would clear his mind. He ventured along a narrow trail that wound through the trees, the sunlight filtering through the leaves, casting dappled patterns on the ground. For a brief moment he felt a sense of peace, a connection to the earth that had always brought him comfort. But as he ventured further, the atmosphere shifted once again. The trail became overgrown, and the air grew thick with an unnatural silence. The birds that had chirped merrily in the morning had fallen silent, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves beneath his feet. As he rounded a bend, he stumbled upon a clearing that felt otherworldly. The trees stood tall and twisted, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. In the center of the clearing lay a stone altar, covered in moss and surrounded by strange symbols carved into the earth. Henry felt an inexplicable pull toward the altar, as if it were calling to him. He approached cautiously, his heart racing, and as he reached out to touch the stone, a cold wind swept through the clearing, sending a chill down his spine. The whispers returned, louder and more insistent, swirling around him like a tempest. "Leave this place," they warned. "You do not belong here." Panic surged through Henry as he stumbled back, realizing that he was not alone. From the shadows emerged figures that seemed to materialize from the very darkness itself. Hollow ones, their faces gaunt and featureless, eyes void of life. They moved with an unnatural grace, gliding toward him as if drawn by his grief. Henry's heart raced as he turned to flee, the weight of his sorrow now transformed into a primal instinct for survival. The hollow ones followed, their whispers growing louder, echoing his deepest fears and regrets. "You cannot escape," they taunted. "You are one of us now." Henry sprinted through the forest, branches clawing at his skin as he pushed through the underbrush. The once familiar landscape had become a labyrinth of shadows, and he could feel the hollow ones closing in, their presence suffocating. He stumbled upon the trail he had taken earlier, but it felt foreign, twisted, and wrong. The trees loomed overhead, their branches intertwining like a web, trapping him in a nightmare of his own making. He could hear their whispers, a cacophony of despair that mirrored his own grief. "You will never be free," they echoed, and he felt the weight of their words settle in his chest. Desperation fueled his flight as he raced back to the RV, his heart pounding in his ears. He fumbled with the keys, his hands shaking as he tried to unlock the door. The hollow ones were closing in, their whispers now a deafening roar. Just as he managed to open the door, he felt a cold breath on the back of his neck, and he stumbled inside. Slamming the door shut behind him, he locked it, his breath coming in ragged gasps as he leaned against the wall, trying to calm the storm of fear and grief that raged within him. Inside the RV, the atmosphere felt stifling, the shadows pressing in around him. He could hear the hollow ones outside, their whispers now a haunting melody that seeped through the walls. "You cannot hide," they sang. "You are ours." Henry felt the walls closing in, the grief that had once felt like a heavy blanket now suffocating him. He sank to the floor, tears streaming down his face as he grappled with the reality of his situation. The loss of his wife had left a void in his heart, and now it felt as if the Hollow Ones were feeding on that emptiness, drawing him deeper into despair. In that moment of vulnerability, Henry realized that he could not run from his grief. It was a part of him, woven into the very fabric of his being. The Hollow Ones were manifestations of his pain, a reflection of the darkness he had been trying to escape. He understood that he had to confront his sorrow, to acknowledge the love he had lost and the memories that haunted him. He would not let the Hollow Ones claim him. He would fight for his survival, not just against them, but against the grief that had consumed him. As he opened the door of the RV, the whispers grew quiet, as if the Hollow Ones were momentarily taken aback by his resolve. Henry stepped outside, the cool air hitting his face like a splash of cold water. He faced the clearing where he had first encountered the Hollow Ones, the stone altar standing ominously in the center. He took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present moment. I will honor my wife's memory, but I will not let it consume me. The Hollow Ones emerged from the shadows, their forms shifting and swirling like smoke. But this time, Henry stood his ground. He focused on the love he had shared with his wife, the joy and laughter that had filled their lives. With each thought, he felt a warmth spreading through him, pushing back against the coldness of the Hollow Ones. "You do not own me," he shouted, his voice echoing through the trees. "I am more than my pain." As he spoke, the Hollow Ones began to waver, their forms flickering like candle flames in the wind. The whispers turned to cries of frustration, and Henry felt a surge of power coursing through him. He stepped forward, channeling his grief into strength, and with one final declaration, he shouted, "I choose to live!" The Hollow Ones shrieked, their forms dissipating into the air like mist in the morning sun. In that moment, Henry felt a profound sense of release. The weight of his grief began to lift, replaced by a newfound clarity. He had faced the darkness within himself and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the memories of his wife without being consumed by sorrow. As the sun began to rise over Devil's Gate, casting a warm glow over the landscape, Henry knew that he had transformed his trip from a solitary escape into a journey of survival and self-discovery. He would carry his wife's memory with him, not as a burden, but as a guiding light, illuminating the path ahead. With a renewed sense of purpose, he returned to the RV, ready to continue his journey, not just through the wilderness, but through the complexities of life and love. Samantha had always been drawn to the great outdoors, finding solace in the embrace of nature. With her backpack slung over her shoulder and a map in hand, she set out on a solo adventure to explore the hidden camping spots of Redwood National Park. The towering trees, some of the tallest in the world, stood like ancient sentinels, their bark rough and weathered, whispering secrets of the past. The initial excitement bubbled within her as she navigated the winding trails, the sun filtering through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor. This was her escape, a chance to immerse herself in untouched wilderness, far from the noise and chaos of everyday life. As she ventured deeper into the park, Samantha felt a sense of freedom wash over her. The air was crisp and fragrant with the scent of pine and earth, invigorating her spirit. She relished the solitude, the quietude of the forest wrapping around her like a comforting blanket. Each step brought her closer to the hidden gems she sought, campsites that promised tranquility and a connection to nature that was often hard to find. She had heard whispers of secluded spots where the beauty of the redwoods could be experienced without the intrusion of other campers. The thrill of discovery fueled her determination, and she pressed on, eager to uncover the secrets of the forest. After hours of hiking, Samantha stumbled upon a narrow, overgrown path that seemed to beckon her. Curiosity piqued, she decided to follow it, her heart racing with anticipation. The trail twisted and turned, leading her deeper into the heart of the forest. As she walked, the sounds of the outside world faded away, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of birds. It felt as though she had stepped into another realm, one untouched by human hands. The excitement of finding a hidden campsite surged within her, and she imagined the peaceful nights she would spend under the stars, surrounded by the towering giants of the forest. However, as she continued along the path, the atmosphere began to shift. The sunlight dimmed, filtered through the thick canopy above, casting long shadows that danced ominously on the ground. Samantha felt a twinge of unease, but she brushed it aside, attributing it to her imagination. After all, she was an experienced camper, accustomed to the quirks of the wilderness. But as she rounded a bend, her heart sank. Before her lay a campsite that was anything but inviting. The area was eerily quiet, the air thick with an unsettling tension. A fire pit sat in the center, surrounded by a circle of stones, but the remnants of a fire were cold and ashen. Scattered around the site were remnants of what appeared to be hastily abandoned belongings. Torn tents, a broken chair, and a backpack that lay open, its contents strewn about as if someone had left in a hurry. Samantha's pulse quickened as she took in the scene, a sense of dread creeping into her mind. This was not the untouched wilderness she had hoped to find. It felt like a place that had been marred by something sinister. As she stepped closer, she noticed strange markings carved into the trees surrounding the campsite. They were crude and jagged, resembling symbols she couldn't quite decipher. A chill ran down her spine as she realized that the markings seemed to form a pattern, almost like a warning. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she felt an overwhelming urge to turn back. But curiosity held her in place, and she found herself drawn to the backpack, wondering what had happened to its owner. With trembling hands, she approached the abandoned gear, her heart pounding in her chest. As she rifled through the contents, she found a journal, its pages weathered and stained. Flipping it open, she began to read the entries, her stomach twisting with each word. The writer spoke of strange occurrences in the forest, whispers in the night, shadows that moved on their own, and an overwhelming sense of being watched. When the final entry sent a shiver through her. "I can feel it closing in. I don't know how much longer I can stay here. If anyone finds this, please don't come looking for me." Samantha's breath caught in her throat as she closed the journal, the weight of the words settling heavily on her shoulders. The excitement of exploration had morphed into a suffocating sense of dread. She glanced around the campsite, her mind racing with possibilities. What had happened to the camper? Had they encountered something in the woods that had driven them away? The unsettling feeling of being watched returned, and she could almost hear the whispers that had haunted the journal's author. Panic began to set in as she realized she was alone in this vast wilderness, surrounded by towering trees that seemed to close in around her. The forest, once a sanctuary, now felt like a trap. She turned to leave, her instincts screaming at her to get out. But as she retraced her steps, the path seemed to shift. The trees loomed larger, their branches twisting like skeletal fingers, and the shadows deepened, swallowing the light. The sense of isolation intensified, and she felt the weight of the forest pressing down on her. Samantha quickened her pace, her heart racing as she navigated the unfamiliar terrain. The whispers grew louder, echoing in her mind, a cacophony of voices that seemed to taunt her. "You shouldn't have come here," they hissed. "You're not welcome." The psychological tension mounted as she fought against the rising tide of fear. She could feel the presence of something lurking just beyond her line of sight, something that thrived in the darkness of the forest. The sun. As she stumbled through the underbrush, her thoughts spiraled into a frenzy. What if she was being followed? What if the camper had encountered something malevolent, and now it was after her? The forest, once a place of beauty and adventure, had transformed into a nightmare. Each snap of a twig sent her heart racing, and she could feel the cold sweat trickling down her back. The markings on the trees flashed in her mind, a reminder of the unknown dangers that lurked in the shadows. Desperation fueled her flight as she pushed through the dense foliage, her breath coming in ragged gasps. She had to get back to the RV, to safety. But the path seemed to twist and turn, leading her deeper into the forest rather than back to the trailhead. The trees closed in around her, their branches reaching out like claws, and the whispers grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. "You can't escape. They do belong to us now. Just when she thought she couldn't go any further, she stumbled into a small clearing. The sunlight broke through the canopy, illuminating the space and offering a moment of respite. But as she caught her breath, she noticed something that sent a chill down her spine. A figure standing at the edge of the clearing, partially obscured by the trees. It was tall and thin, its features indistinguishable, but the way it moved was unnatural, almost as if it were gliding rather than walking. Samantha's heart raced as she took a step back, her instincts screaming at her to run. The figure remained still, watching her with an intensity that made her skin crawl. She could feel its gaze piercing through the shadows, and the whispers intensified, swirling around her like a storm. "You shouldn't have come here," they echoed, a chorus of voices that filled her with dread. The psychological tension reached a breaking point as she grappled with the reality of her situation. Was this figure a manifestation of her fear, or was it something far more sinister? With a surge of adrenaline, Samantha turned and sprinted back into the trees, her mind racing with thoughts of escape. The forest felt alive, the branches clawing at her as she pushed through the underbrush. She could hear the figure moving behind her, the whispers growing louder, urging her to stop, to turn around. But she refused to give in to the terror that threatened to consume her. She had to keep moving, had to find her way back to the RV. As she ran, the landscape began to shift once more. The trees seemed to close in around her, the path twisting and turning in ways that defied logic. Panic surged within her as she realized she was lost, disoriented in a forest that had turned against her. The whispers morphed into a cacophony of voices, each one more insistent than the last. "You can't escape," they chanted. "You belong to us." Just when she thought she couldn't go any further, she burst into another clearing, her heart pounding in her chest. The sunlight poured down, illuminating the space, but the sense of safety was fleeting. The figure stood at the edge once more, its presence looming like a dark cloud. Samantha felt the weight of despair settle over her, the realization that she was trapped in a nightmare of her own making. The psychological tension reached its peak as she confronted the unknown, the fear of what lay ahead threatening to overwhelm her. In that moment of desperation, she remembered the journal, the words of the previous camper echoing in her mind. "If anyone finds this, please don't come looking for me." The warning resonated deeply, and she understood that the forest held secrets that were not meant to be uncovered. With a newfound determination, she turned away from the figure, refusing to let fear dictate her actions. She would not succumb to the darkness that threatened to engulf her. Samantha took a deep breath, grounding herself in the present moment. She focused on the sounds of the forest, the rustle of leaves, the distant call of a bird, and allowed herself to feel the connection to the earth beneath her feet. She would not let the whispers drown out her resolve. With each step, she pushed back against the fear, reclaiming her strength as she navigated the clearing. As she moved forward, the figure began to fade, its presence diminishing like smoke in the wind. The whispers grew quieter, replaced by the soothing sounds of nature. The sunlight broke through the trees, illuminating her path as she found her way back to the trail. The psychological tension that had gripped her began to dissipate. With renewed determination, Samantha pressed on, her heart steadying as she navigated the familiar terrain. The forest, once a place of terror, transformed back into a sanctuary, a reminder of the beauty that existed beyond the shadows. She would carry the lessons of her experience with her, a testament to the strength that lay within her. As she finally reached the RV, relief washed over her. She had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the wilderness once more. The hidden camping spots of Redwood National Park held secrets, but she had learned that the true adventure lay not just in exploration, but with a deep breath, she stepped inside the RV, ready to continue her journey, knowing that she would always carry the spirit of the forest with her, a reminder of the resilience that lay within. Sarah and Dylan had always shared a passion for adventure, their relationship built on a foundation of spontaneity and a love for the great outdoors. When they decided to embark on a weekend trip to Los Padres National Forest, excitement bubbled between them like a fizzy drink ready to overflow. The sprawling wilderness, with its rugged mountains and dense forests, promised a perfect escape from their busy lives. They packed their gear into Dylan's trusty old truck filled with camping supplies, hiking boots, and a sense of anticipation that made their hearts race. This trip was meant to be a celebration of their adventurous spirit, a chance to explore the beauty of nature together. As they drove deeper into the forest, the landscape transformed around them. Towering trees lined the winding roads, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. The air was fresh and invigorating, filled with the scent of pine and earth. Sarah felt a thrill of excitement as they arrived at their campsite, a secluded spot nestled among the trees, far away from the noise of civilization. They set up their tent, laughing and joking as they worked together, their bond strengthening with each shared task. The sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm golden glow over the campsite, and they settled down for the evening, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories under the stars. However, as night fell, the atmosphere shifted. The once comforting sounds of the forest transformed into an eerie symphony of rustling leaves and distant animal calls. Sarah felt a twinge of unease, but she brushed it aside, attributing it to the unfamiliarity of the wilderness. Dylan, ever the optimist, reassured her, wrapping his arm around her shoulders as they gazed up at the stars. "It's just nature," he said with a grin. Nothing to worry about." But as the darkness deepened, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The first sign of trouble came the following morning when they set out for a hike. The trail was beautiful, winding through towering trees and vibrant wildflowers, but as they ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere grew heavier. The sunlight struggled to penetrate the thick canopy above, casting long shadows that danced ominously on the ground. Sarah noticed that the cheerful sounds of birds had faded. She exchanged a worried glance with Dylan, who seemed to sense her unease but brushed it off with a wave of his hand. "It's just a quiet part of the forest," he said, trying to reassure her. As they continued along the trail, Sarah's apprehension grew. The path twisted and turned, leading them deeper into the woods, and she felt a growing sense of isolation. The trees loomed larger, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers, and the air felt thick with an unspoken tension. It was as if the forest itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. Dylan, ever the adventurous spirit, urged her to keep going, his enthusiasm infectious. "Come on, it'll be fun. Let's see where this trail leads," he said, his eyes sparkling with excitement. But as they pressed on, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The trail began to narrow, and the underbrush thickened, making it difficult to navigate. Sarah felt a sense of foreboding wash over her, and she hesitated, glancing back the way they had come. "Maybe we should turn back," she suggested, her voice tinged with uncertainty. Dylan, however, was undeterred. "Just a little further," he insisted, his adventurous spirit pushing them onward. Reluctantly, Sarah followed, trusting Dylan's instincts, even as her own intuition screamed for caution. As they ventured deeper into the forest, the supernatural occurrences began. It started with strange sounds, whispers that seemed to echo through the trees, barely audible yet undeniably present. Sarah glanced around, her heart racing as she tried to locate the source of the voices. "Did you hear that?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dylan shrugged, dismissing her concerns. "It's probably just the wind," he replied. But Sarah could see the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. The whispers grew louder, swirling around them like a chilling breeze. And Sarah felt a shiver run down her spine. Then came the shadows. At first, they were just fleeting glimpses at the edge of her vision, dark shapes darting between the trees. But as they continued along the trail, the shadows grew more pronounced, taking on a life of their own. Sarah could feel them watching her, lurking just beyond the reach of the sunlight. Panic began to set in, and she grabbed Dylan's arm, her grip tightening. "We need to go back," she urged, her voice trembling. But Dylan, caught up in the thrill of exploration, shook his head. "Just a little longer, Sarah. We're almost there." As they pressed on, the forest seemed to close in around them, the trees growing denser and the air heavier. The whispers morphed into a cacophony of voices, each one more insistent than the last. "Turn back," they warned. "You don't belong here." Sarah's heart raced as she felt the weight of their words, the sense of danger closing in around them. She could see the change in Dylan, too. His demeanor shifted, the adventurous spark in his eyes dimming as the atmosphere grew dark. It was as if the forest was feeding off their fear, transforming their excitement into something sinister. Finally, they reached a clearing, but it was anything but welcoming. The ground was littered with remnants of a campfire, charred logs scattered haphazardly, and the air felt thick with an unsettling energy. Sarah's heart sank as she took in the scene, a sense of dread washing over her. "Dylan, we should go," she urged, her voice rising in urgency. But Dylan stood frozen, his gaze fixed on something in the distance. "Look," he said, pointing toward the edge of the clearing. At first, Sarah couldn't see what he was pointing at, but as she squinted into the shadows, her blood ran cold. There, partially obscured by the trees, stood a figure, a tall, gaunt silhouette that seemed to shimmer in the dim light. Its features were indistinguishable, but the way it moved was unnatural, almost as if it were gliding rather than walking. Fear gripped Sarah's heart, and she instinctively took a step back. "Dylan, we need to leave now," she pleaded, but he remained rooted to the spot, entranced by the figure. "Just a little closer," he murmured, his voice distant and hollow. Sarah's stomach twisted as she realized that Dylan was no longer the adventurous boyfriend she knew. Something had shifted within him. The isolation of the forest had taken hold, warping his perception and drawing him toward the unknown. "Dylan, please," she cried, desperation lacing her words. But he didn't respond, his eyes locked on the figure as if it were calling to him. In that moment, Sarah felt a surge of panic. She had to get through to him, to break whatever spell the forest had cast. "Dylan, remember why we came here. We wanted to explore together, to have fun," she shouted, her voice breaking. The figure seemed to flicker, and for a brief moment Dylan's expression shifted, a flicker of recognition crossing his face. But just as quickly it vanished, replaced by a vacant stare. The whispers grew louder, drowning out her thoughts. "You belong to us now," they chanted, a chorus of voices that filled the air with an oppressive weight. Sarah felt the ground beneath her tremble, the very essence of the forest shifting as if it were alive. She grabbed Dylan's arm, pulling him away from the figure, but he resisted, his strength surprising her. "No, Sarah, we have to stay," he insisted, his voice filled with a strange urgency. Tears streamed down her face as she fought against him, the bond of trust they had built over their relationship now hanging by a thread. "Dylan, please, this isn't you," she cried, desperation clawing at her throat. But the isolation of the forest had transformed him, and she could see the darkness creeping into his eyes. The trust they had shared was being tested in the face of the unknown, and Sarah felt the weight of their situation pressing down on her. With a surge of determination, she pulled him closer, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "We can't let this place take us. We have to leave, together." The words seemed to penetrate the fog that surrounded him, and for a moment she saw a flicker of recognition in his eyes. "Sarah!" he whispered. But before he could finish, the figure lunged forward, its form shifting and twisting in the shadows. In that instant, Sarah felt a rush of adrenaline. She grabbed Dylan's hand, pulling him away from the clearing as the whispers crescendoed into a deafening roar. They ran, the forest closing in around them, branches clawing at their skin as they navigated the twisted path. The shadows chased them, the figure looming just behind, its presence a constant reminder of the danger that lurked in the darkness. As they sprinted through the trees, Sarah's heart raced, the fear of losing Dylan propelling her forward. She could feel the weight of the forest pressing down on them, the isolation threatening to swallow them whole. But she refused to give in. "We're almost there," she shouted, her voice echoing through the trees. "Just a little further." Finally, they burst into a clearing, the sunlight breaking through the canopy above. The figure hesitated at the edge, its form flickering in the light. Sarah felt a surge of hope as she pulled Dylan closer, the warmth of the sun washing over them. "We made it," she exclaimed, relief flooding her voice. But as she turned to look at Dylan, her heart sank. The darkness still lingered in his eyes, the transformation not yet complete. "Sarah," he murmured, his voice distant once more. "I can't leave." Panic surged within her as she realized the battle was far from over. The isolation of the forest had taken hold, and she had to fight for the Dylan she loved. "You're stronger than this," she urged, her voice filled with determination. "We can fight it together." With every ounce of strength she had, Sarah pulled him closer, refusing to let go. The whispers grew louder, the shadows closing in, but she held on to the memories of their adventures, the laughter, the love, the trust that had brought them together. "Remember us," she cried, her voice breaking. "Remember why we came here." In that moment, something shifted within Dylan. The darkness flickered in his eyes, and for the first time, he seemed to break free from the grip of the forest. "Sarah," he whispered, his voice filled with confusion and fear. "I'm scared." Tears streamed down her face as she held him tightly, the bond of trust reigniting between them. "I'm here," she reassured him. "We'll face this together." With a surge of determination, they turned away from the shadows, the sunlight guiding their path as they raced back toward the trailhead. The whispers faded, replaced by the sounds of the forest coming back to life. The trees seemed to part for them, the darkness receding as they made their way back to safety. The isolation that had threatened to consume them was broken, and as they emerged from the woods, Sarah felt a sense of triumph wash over her. They had faced the unknown and emerged stronger, their bond tested but unbroken. The trust they had built over their relationship had been challenged, but in the face of danger, they had found their way back to each other. As they reached the truck, Sarah turned to Dylan, her heart swelling with love and relief. "We did it," she said, her voice filled with emotion. "We made it out together." Dylan nodded, a flicker of the adventurous spirit she had fallen in love with returning to his eyes. "I'm so glad you were there," he replied, his voice steady. "I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't fought for me." In that moment, Sarah knew that their adventure in Los Padres National Forest had changed them forever. They had faced the darkness together, and in doing so, they had strengthened the bond that held them together. As they drove away from the forest, the sun setting behind them, Sarah felt a sense of peace wash over her. They had survived the isolation and the supernatural occurrences that had threatened to tear them apart. The adventure had taken a dark turn, but it had also reaffirmed their love and trust in one another. With the open road ahead, they were ready to embrace whatever adventures awaited them, knowing that together they could face anything. Jonah had always been drawn to the stark beauty of the desert, and Death Valley National Park was a place that had long captured his imagination. The vast expanse of arid land, punctuated by rugged mountains and the shimmering mirages that danced on the horizon, promised an adventure unlike any other. As he drove through the park, the sun hung low in the sky, casting a warm, golden hue over the landscape. Jonah felt a thrill of excitement coursing through him. This was the perfect escape from the chaos of his everyday life. He had come to explore, to find solace in the solitude of the desert, and to reconnect with himself in a way that had eluded him for far too long. As he parked his car and stepped out, the heat enveloped him like a heavy blanket, but it was a welcome sensation. The air was dry and crisp, filled with the scent of sagebrush and the distant promise of adventure. Jonah took a deep breath, savoring the moment as he gazed out at the breathtaking scenery. The undulating sand dunes, the jagged peaks of the Panamint Mountains, and the vibrant colors of the rocks created a surreal landscape that felt almost otherworldly. He felt invigorated, ready to hike the trails and immerse himself in the beauty of the park. With his backpack slung over his shoulder, Jonah set off on a trail that wound through the desert. The sun beat down relentlessly, but he welcomed the challenge, feeling alive with each step he took. The vastness of the landscape was both exhilarating and humbling, a reminder of how small he was in the grand scheme of things. As he hiked, he marveled at the unique geological formations, the way the light played off the rocks, and the silence that enveloped him. It was a stark contrast to the noise of his life back home, where responsibilities and regrets loomed large. However, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the desert floor, Jonah felt a shift in the atmosphere. The beauty of the landscape took on a more ominous tone, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. The shadows lengthened, stretching across the ground like dark fingers reaching out for him. Jonah paused, glancing around, but there was nothing but the vast emptiness of the desert. He shook his head, dismissing the unease that crept into his mind. It was just the fading light playing tricks on him, he thought. As night fell, the temperature dropped sharply, and Jonah set up camp in a small clearing. He built a fire, its flickering flames casting a warm glow against the encroaching darkness. The stars began to twinkle overhead, a breathtaking display that made him feel both insignificant and connected to something greater. He sat by the fire, roasting marshmallows and reflecting on his life, the choices he had made and the paths he had taken. But as he stared into the flames, the shadows around him deepened, and he felt an unsettling presence lurking just beyond the reach of the firelight. It started with whispers, soft, barely audible but unmistakable. Jonah strained to listen, his heart racing as he tried to make sense of the sounds. They seemed to come from all directions, swirling around him like a haunting melody. "Jonah," they called, a chorus of voices that sent chills down his spine. He glanced around, but the darkness was impenetrable, and the shadows danced just beyond the firelight. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling slightly. But there was no response, only the rustling of the wind through the sagebrush. As the night wore on, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. Jonah felt a wave of guilt wash over him, a suffocating weight that pressed down on his chest. Memories flooded his mind, faces of people he had hurt, choices he had made that had led him to this moment. The shadows seemed to take on a life of their own, morphing into figures that loomed just outside the firelight, their features indistinguishable, but their presence palpable. Jonah's heart raced as he fought against the rising tide of panic. "This isn't real," he told himself. But the guilt gnawed at him, a relentless reminder of his past. Suddenly the fire flickered violently, casting eerie shadows that danced across the ground. Jonah felt a cold breeze sweep through the clearing, extinguishing the warmth of the flames for a brief moment. In that darkness, he saw them, figures emerging from the shadows, their forms shifting and swirling like smoke. They were the manifestations of his guilt, the ghosts of his past that he had tried so hard to escape. "You can't run from us, Jonah," they whispered, their voices echoing in his mind. "You left us behind." Panic surged within him as he stumbled back, his heart pounding in his chest. The shadows closed in, their whispers growing louder, drowning out his thoughts. Jonah felt the weight of their accusations, the burden of his choices pressing down on him. He had come to the desert seeking solace, but instead, he was confronted with the very demons he had tried to forget. "No, leave me alone," he shouted, desperation lacing his voice. But the shadows only laughed, a haunting sound that sent chills down his spine. In that moment, Jonah realized that he could not escape the consequences of his past. The isolation of the desert had stripped away the distractions of his life, leaving him vulnerable and exposed. The supernatural elements he faced were not just figments of his imagination, they were the manifestations of his guilt. The shadows of the people he had hurt, and that he had thought he could find peace in the wilderness. But instead, he was forced to confront the darkness within himself. As the figures closed in, Jonah felt a surge of anger rise within him. He had spent too long running from his past, hiding from the pain he had caused. "I'm not afraid of you," he shouted, his voice echoing through the night. "I won't let you control me anymore." The shadows hesitated, their forms flickering as if taken aback by his defiance. Jonah took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present moment. He had to face his guilt head-on, to acknowledge the pain he had caused and the people he had left behind. With newfound determination, Jonah stepped forward, the firelight illuminating his path. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice steady. "I'm sorry for the hurt I caused, for the people I abandoned. I can't change the past, but I can learn from it." The shadows shifted, their forms wavering as if they were unsure of how to respond. Jonah felt a weight lift from his shoulders, the burden of guilt beginning to dissipate as he confronted the truth of his actions. The whispers softened, transforming into a gentle breeze that rustled through the trees. The figures began to fade, their presence no longer suffocating, but instead a reminder of the lessons he had learned. Jonah realized that he could not erase the past, but he could choose to move forward, to honor the memories of those he had hurt by living a life that reflected his growth. The psychological horror of confronting his past had transformed into a catalyst for change, a chance to reclaim his life. As the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Jonah stood in the clearing, the remnants of the night fading away. The shadows had retreated, leaving behind a sense of clarity and purpose. He felt a renewed sense of hope as he watched the sun rise over the desert, casting a warm glow over the landscape. The beauty of Death Valley, once a backdrop for his fears, now felt like a canvas for his future. With a deep breath, Jonah packed up his campsite, the weight of his past no longer a burden but a part of his journey. He had faced the darkness within himself and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. As he hiked back to his car, the sun warming his skin, he felt a sense of freedom that he had long thought lost. The desert had tested him, but it had also shown him the way forward. Driving out of Death Valley, Jonah glanced in the rearview mirror, the vast landscape receding behind him. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he felt a sense of peace settle within him. The shadows of his past would always be a part of him, but they no longer held power over him. He had confronted his guilt and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose, ready to face whatever lay ahead. The adventure had transformed him, and as he drove toward the horizon, he felt a sense of hope for the future, a promise of new beginnings waiting just beyond the next bend in the road. Mia had always found solace in nature, a sanctuary where her creativity could flourish. As an artist, she often sought inspiration from the world around her, and this time she had chosen the Shasta Trinity National Forest as her muse. The allure of the forest was undeniable. Its towering trees, lush undergrowth, and the gentle sound of the river flowing nearby promised a peaceful retreat from the chaos of her everyday life. With her sketchbook in hand and a heart full of hope, she set off into the woods, eager to capture the beauty that surrounded her. As Mia ventured deeper into the forest, she felt a sense of tranquility wash over her. The sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting a warm, golden glow on the forest floor. The air was crisp and fragrant, filled with the scent of pine and damp earth. She paused to take it all in, closing her eyes and listening to the symphony of nature, the rustling of leaves, the distant call of a bird, and the gentle babbling of the river. This was exactly what she needed, a place to escape, to breathe, and to let her creativity flow. Finding a secluded spot by the river, Mia set up her easel and began to paint. The vibrant colors of the forest inspired her, and she felt a rush of excitement as she mixed her paints and applied them to the canvas. Each stroke felt liberating, a release of the pent-up emotions she had been carrying. She lost herself in the process, the world around her fading away as she immersed herself in her art. The peaceful setting enveloped her, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. However, as the sun began to dip lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the forest, Mia sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The once comforting sounds of nature grew quieter, replaced by an unsettling stillness that hung in the air. She glanced around, her heart racing slightly as she noticed the shadows lengthening. Dismissing her unease as a figment of her imagination, she returned to her painting. But the feeling of being watched lingered at the back of her mind. As the light faded, Mia decided to pack up her supplies and head back to her campsite. The forest, which had felt so inviting just hours before, now seemed to close in around her. The trees loomed larger, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. She quickened her pace, the path becoming more difficult to navigate as the darkness deepened. The peaceful setting had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows, and Mia felt a growing sense of dread. Suddenly, she stumbled upon a clearing that felt eerily out of place. In the center stood a circle of stones, arranged meticulously as if they had been placed there intentionally. The air felt charged, heavy with an unexplainable energy that sent chills down her spine. Mia approached the circle cautiously, her instincts screaming at her to turn back, but curiosity held her in place, and she knelt down to examine the stones more closely. They were cold to the touch, and as she traced her fingers along their surfaces, she felt a shiver run through her. It was then that she noticed the markings etched into the ground around the stones, strange symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. A sense of unease washed over her, and she stood up abruptly, her heart racing. The whispers began, soft at first, like the rustling of leaves, but they quickly grew louder, swirling around her like a tempest. "Mia!" they called, a chorus of voices that sent a chill down her spine. She glanced around, but the shadows remained impenetrable, and the forest felt alive with an unsettling energy. Panic surged within her as she turned to leave, but the shadows seemed to shift, coalescing into dark figures that lurked just beyond the trees. They were the Hollow Ones, manifestations of her deepest fears and insecurities. Mia had heard stories of these entities, lost souls trapped in the forest, feeding off the creativity and energy of those who dared to enter. She had always dismissed them as mere folklore, but now, standing in the clearing, she felt their presence all around her. "Leave this place," they whispered, their voices echoing in her mind. "You do not belong here." The fear that gripped her was suffocating, and she stumbled back, her heart racing as she fought against the rising tide of panic. The Hollow Ones were closing in, their forms shifting and swirling like smoke, and Mia felt the weight of their gaze upon her. She had come to the forest seeking inspiration, but instead, she was confronted with the very essence of her fears. Desperation fueled her flight as she raced back through the trees, the path twisting and turning in ways that felt foreign. The shadows chased her, their whispers growing louder, drowning out her thoughts. "You cannot escape," they taunted. "You are one of us now." The psychological horror of confronting her past and her insecurities surged within her, and she felt the weight of her failures pressing down on her. The forest, once a sanctuary, had transformed into a nightmare. Mia stumbled into another clearing, her breath coming in ragged gasps. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an ethereal glow over the landscape, but the beauty of the night was lost on her. The Hollow Ones emerged from the shadows, their forms flickering in the moonlight, and she felt a surge of despair. "You cannot create," they whispered, their voices a haunting melody that echoed in her mind. "You're not worthy." In that moment, Mia felt the weight of their words, the truth of her insecurities crashing down around her. She had always struggled with self-doubt, the fear that her art would never be good enough, that she would never be able to capture the beauty she saw in the world. The Hollow Ones fed off that fear, their presence a constant reminder of her failures. "No," she shouted, her voice breaking. "I won't let you take me." With a surge of determination, Mia faced the shadows, refusing to let them control her. She had come to the forest seeking inspiration, and she would not let her fears extinguish that flame. "I am an artist," she declared, her voice steady despite the terror that gripped her. "I will create, no matter what." The Hollow Ones hesitated, their forms flickering as if taken aback by her defiance. As she stood her ground, the whispers began to fade, replaced by the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. The shadows wavered, their presence no longer suffocating, but instead a reminder of the struggles she had faced. Mia realized that she could not escape her fears, but she could confront them, acknowledge them, and use them as fuel for her creativity. The psychological horror of the night had transformed into a catalyst for growth. With newfound resolve, Mia turned away from the Hollow Ones, the moonlight illuminating her path as she made her way back to her campsite. The forest felt different now, the shadows no longer oppressive, but instead a part of the landscape she had come to love. She had faced the darkness within herself. As she reached her campsite, Mia felt a sense of peace wash over her. The fire flickered warmly, casting a soft glow against the darkness, and she took a deep breath, grounding herself in the present moment. She had confronted her fears and insecurities, and in doing so, she had found the inspiration she had been seeking. The allure of the forest had not diminished. With renewed determination, Mia set up her easel once more, the moonlight guiding her as she began to paint. The colors flowed from her brush, vibrant and alive, capturing the beauty of the forest and the emotions that had surged within her. Each stroke felt liberating, a release of the pent-up energy she had carried. The shadows that had once haunted her now danced playfully around her, a reminder of the struggles she had faced and the strength she had found. After a few moments, Peter came down the stairs. Her previous desire to hid within herself and danced playfully around her, a reminder of the struggles she had faced and the strength she had found. As the night wore on, Mia lost herself in her art, the world around her fading away as she poured her heart onto the canvas. The whispers of the hollow ones had transformed into a gentle breeze, a reminder of the journey she had taken. She had faced her fears and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the beauty of the world and the creativity that flowed within her. When the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, Mia stood back to admire her work. The painting captured the essence of the forest, the vibrant colors reflecting the beauty she had found in the darkness. She felt a sense of accomplishment wash over her, a reminder that she could create despite her fears. The allure of Shasta Trinity National Forest had not only inspired her art, but had also helped her confront the shadows that had lingered in her mind. With a heart full of gratitude, Mia packed up her supplies, ready to leave the forest behind. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she felt a renewed sense of purpose as she stepped back onto the trail. The shadows of her past would always be a part of her, but they no longer held power over her. She had faced the darkness and emerged with a newfound strength. The forest had tested her, but it had also shown her the way forward, a reminder that creativity could flourish, even in the face of fear. Abigail had always been fascinated by the supernatural, drawn to the stories of haunted places and the mysteries they held. When she heard about Devil's Hole in Death Valley, a location steeped in eerie history and chilling legends, her curiosity was piqued. The site was notorious for its dark past, rumored to be haunted by the spirits of those who had met tragic ends there. With her notebook in hand and a camera slung over her shoulder, she set out on a journey to uncover the secrets of this infamous location. As she drove through the desolate landscape of Death Valley, the sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the parched earth. The air was thick with heat, and the silence was almost deafening, broken only by the occasional rustle of wind. Abigail felt a shiver run down her spine as she approached Devil's Hole, a deep, dark cavern that seemed to beckon her closer. The entrance loomed before her, a gaping maw in the earth that exuded an unsettling energy. She parked her car and stepped out, the oppressive heat replaced by a cool breeze that whispered through the canyon. The atmosphere was thick with tension, and Abigail could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. Devil's Hole was not just a geological formation, it was a site of tragedy and despair. The area had been the scene of numerous accidents and unexplained disappearances over the years, with locals warning that the spirits of those who had perished still lingered in the shadows. As she approached the entrance, she recalled the stories she had heard, tales of hikers who had ventured too close and never returned, of strange noises echoing from the depths of the hall, and of ghostly apparitions that had been spotted by those brave enough to explore its depths. With her heart racing, Abigail stepped closer to the edge of the hole, peering into the darkness below. The cavern seemed to stretch infinitely, its depths shrouded in mystery. She took a deep breath, steeling herself for what lay ahead. Armed with her flashlight and a sense of determination, she descended into the cavern, the beam of light cutting through the darkness like a knife. The air grew cooler as she ventured deeper, and the silence enveloped her, amplifying the sound of her footsteps echoing off the walls. As she explored the cavern, Abigail felt a strange sensation wash over her, a mix of excitement and dread. The walls were damp and rough, and the ground was uneven, littered with rocks and debris. She paused to take notes, documenting her observations and the eerie atmosphere that surrounded her. The further she went, the more she felt as if she were being watched. a prickling sensation at the back of her neck that made her heart race. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to her imagination, but the unease lingered. Suddenly, a low rumble echoed through the cavern, causing Abigail to freeze in place. The sound reverberated off the walls, growing louder and more intense. She aimed her flashlight toward the source of the noise, her heart pounding in her chest. The beam of light illuminated a narrow passageway leading deeper into the cavern, and she felt an inexplicable pull to explore it. With a mix of trepidation and curiosity, she stepped forward, the darkness swallowing her whole. As she navigated the narrow passage, the air grew thick with an otherworldly energy. Shadows danced along the walls, and Abigail could hear faint whispers echoing through the darkness. The voices were indistinct, but they seemed to call out to her, urging her to come closer. "Abigail," they whispered, a haunting melody that sent chills down her spine. She hesitated, her instinct screaming at her to turn back. But the allure of the unknown was too strong. She pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets that lay hidden within the depths of Devil's Hole. The passage opened up into a larger chamber, and Abigail's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight before her. The walls were adorned with strange markings, symbols etched into the stone that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. The air was thick with an oppressive energy, and she felt a wave of nausea wash over her. It was as if the very essence of the cavern was alive. And she raised her camera, snapping photos of the markings, her mind racing with possibilities. What had happened here? What dark secrets lay buried within the stone? As she examined the symbols, the whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a tempest. "Leave this place," they warned, their voices a cacophony of fear and despair. Abigail's heart raced as she felt the weight of their words, the urgency of their message pressing down on her. She turned to leave, but the shadows seemed to close in around her, blocking her path. Panic surged within her as she realized she was trapped, the darkness closing in like a vice. In that moment, Abigail felt a surge of fear unlike anything she had ever experienced. The shadows morphed into figures, their forms indistinct, but their presence palpable. They were the spirits of those who had perished in the depths of Devil's Hole, their anguish echoing through the cavern. "You should not have come here," they whispered, their voices a haunting reminder of the dangers that lurked within the darkness. Abigail's mind raced as she grappled with the reality of her situation. She had come seeking answers, but now she was confronted with the very essence of fear and despair. Desperation fueled her flight as she stumbled back through the passage, the shadows closing in around her. The whispers grew louder, a cacophony of voices that echoed in her mind. "You cannot escape," they chanted, their words a chilling reminder of the fate that awaited those who dared to uncover the secrets of Devil's Hole. Abigail's heart raced as she fought against the rising tide of panic, her instincts screaming at her to get out. As she emerged from the passage, the larger chamber felt suffocating, the air thick with an oppressive energy. The markings on the walls seemed to pulse with a life of their own, and Abigail could feel the weight of the spirits pressing down on her. She had come seeking inspiration, but instead, she was confronted with the darkness that lay hidden within the cavern. The struggle between her desire for knowledge and the fear that gripped her was palpable, and she felt the weight of her choices pressing down on her. With a surge of determination, Abigail turned to face the shadows, refusing to let them control her. "I am not afraid of you," she shouted, her voice echoing through the chamber. "I came here to uncover the truth, and I will not be silenced." The shadows hesitated, their forms flickering as if taken aback by her defiance. Abigail felt a surge of strength as she stood her ground, the whispers beginning to fade as she confronted the darkness within herself. In that moment, she realized that the spirits were not just manifestations of fear, they were a reflection of the secrets she had buried deep within her own psyche. The darkness of Devil's Hole mirrored her own struggles, the pain and regret that had haunted her for years. She had come seeking answers, but now she understood that the true journey lay within herself. The supernatural encounters she faced were not just external, they were a confrontation with her own demons. With newfound clarity, Abigail took a deep breath, grounding herself in the present moment. She had to confront the darkness, to acknowledge the pain she had carried for so long. "I will not let fear control me," she declared, her voice steady, I will face my past and uncover the truth, no matter how painful it may be. The shadows began to recede, their presence no longer suffocating, but instead a reminder of the journey she had taken. "Let us pray together," she said to the man. As the whispers faded into the background, Abigail felt a sense of liberation wash over her. The markings on the walls transformed from symbols of despair to a testament of resilience. She had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. The secrets of Devil's Hole were no longer a source of fear. They were a catalyst for growth, a chance to reclaim her voice and her power. With renewed determination, Abigail made her way back through the passage, the shadows no longer closing in around her. The cavern felt different now, the oppressive energy replaced by a sense of clarity and purpose. She had confronted her fears and emerged with a newfound understanding of herself, ready to embrace the journey ahead. As she stepped back into the light, the sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Abigail took a deep breath, the fresh air filling her lungs as she emerged from the depths of Devil's Hole. The haunting whispers had faded, replaced by the sounds of nature coming back to life. She felt a sense of peace wash over her, a reminder that she could face the darkness and emerge stronger. With her notebook in hand, Abigail began to document her experience, the lessons she had learned, and the secrets she had uncovered. The journey into Devil's Hole had been terrifying, but it had also been transformative. She had faced her fears, confronted the darkness within herself, and emerged with a renewed sense of purpose. As she drove away from Death Valley, Abigail felt a sense of gratitude for the experience. The haunting atmosphere of Devil's Hole had challenged her, but it had also shown her the way forward. She had uncovered dark secrets, not just about the location, but about herself. The journey was far from over, but she felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, knowing that she had the strength to face the darkness and emerge into the light. Elliot had always been captivated by the natural world, his passion for wildlife research igniting a fire within him that drove him to explore the most remote and untouched corners of the earth. When he received the opportunity to conduct research in Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park, he felt a rush of excitement. The park, known for its towering redwoods and diverse ecosystems, promised a wealth of knowledge waiting to be uncovered. With his field journal, camera, and a sense of adventure, he set off into the heart of the forest, eager to document the wildlife and immerse himself in the beauty of nature. As he arrived at the park, Elliot was immediately struck by the grandeur of the redwoods. The ancient trees stood like giants, their massive trunks reaching toward the sky, creating a cathedral-like atmosphere that filled him with awe. Sunlight filtered through the dense canopy, casting dappled shadows on the forest floor, and the air was rich with the scent of damp earth and pine. He felt a thrill of anticipation as he stepped out of his vehicle, ready to begin his exploration. This was a place where science and nature intertwined, and he was determined to uncover the secrets hidden within the woods. Elliot spent the first few days hiking the trails, observing the diverse wildlife that called the park home. He marveled at the playful otters in the river, the majestic deer grazing in the meadows, and the myriad of birds flitting through the trees. Each encounter fueled his passion, and he diligently recorded his observations in his journal, sketching the animals and noting their behaviors. The excitement of discovery filled him with energy, and he felt a deep connection to the land and its inhabitants. However, as he ventured deeper into the forest, Elliot began to notice subtle changes in the atmosphere. The once vibrant sounds of wildlife began to fade, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung in the air. The shadows cast by the towering trees grew longer, and a sense of unease crept into his mind. He brushed it off as fatigue, attributing it to the long hours spent hiking and observing. After all, he was a scientist, grounded in logic and reason. But as the days passed, the feeling of being watched intensified, and he couldn't shake the sense that something was lurking just beyond the trees. One afternoon, while exploring a remote area of the park, Elliot stumbled upon a clearing that felt out of place. The ground was littered with strange markings, deep gouges in the earth that resembled claw marks. He knelt down to examine them, his heart racing with curiosity and apprehension. What could have made these marks? As he studied the area, he noticed an unsettling absence of wildlife. There were no birds singing, no rustling of leaves, just an eerie stillness that sent a chill down his spine. Determined to uncover the mystery, Elliot pressed on, his instincts urging him to be cautious. As he ventured deeper into the clearing, he felt a sudden drop in temperature, the air growing thick and heavy. The shadows seemed to shift around him, and he could hear faint whispers carried on the wind. "Elliot," they called, a haunting melody that sent shivers down his spine. He glanced around, but there was no one there. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he felt a surge of fear wash over him. Suddenly, a rustling sound broke the silence, and Elliot turned to see a figure emerging from the trees. It was tall and gaunt, its skin pale and stretched tight over its bones. The creature's eyes glowed with an unnatural hunger, and Elliot's heart raced as he realized he was face to face with one of the hungry ones. Supernatural beings said to haunt the depths of the forest, preying on those who ventured too far into their territory. The legends had always seemed like mere folklore, but now, standing before him, the reality of the creature sent a wave of terror coursing through him. Elliot stumbled back, his mind racing as he tried to process what he was seeing. The hungry ones were said to be the remnants of those who had lost their way in the forest, consumed by their own desires and transformed into something monstrous. They were drawn to the living, feeding off their energy and vitality. As the creature advanced, Elliot felt a primal instinct to flee. He turned and ran, the sound of his heartbeat pounding in his ears as he navigated the twisted roots and underbrush. The forest, once a place of wonder, had transformed into a labyrinth of shadows and fear. The hungry one pursued him, its breath hot on his neck, and he could hear its whispers growing louder, echoing in his mind. "You cannot escape," it taunted, its voice a chilling reminder of the darkness that lurked within the woods. Elliot's scientific mind raced as he tried to rationalize the situation. He had always believed in the power of knowledge and understanding, but now he was faced with a reality that defied explanation. The tension between science and the unknown hung heavy in the air, and he felt the weight of his own limitations pressing down on him. He had come to study the natural world, but now he was confronted with the supernatural, a force that challenged everything he thought he knew. As he stumbled through the forest, Elliot's thoughts turned to the stories he had heard about the hungry ones. They were said to be drawn to those who sought power or knowledge, feeding off their ambitions and desires. He had always been driven by a thirst for understanding, but now he wondered if that very desire had led him to this moment. Had his pursuit of knowledge blinded him to the dangers that lurked in the shadows? Just when he thought he couldn't run any further, Elliot burst into another clearing, gasping for breath. The moon hung high in the sky, casting an eerie glow over the landscape. He turned to face the hungry one, its form flickering in the moonlight. "What do you want from me?" he shouted, his voice trembling. The creature paused, its glowing eyes fixed on him, and for a moment, he felt a strange connection, a shared understanding of the darkness that lay within. "You seek knowledge," it whispered, its voice a haunting echo. "But knowledge comes at a price." Elliot's heart raced as he grappled with the implications of its words. He had always believed that knowledge was power, but now he realized that it could also lead to destruction. The hungry one was a manifestation of his own fears, a reminder of the dangers that came with his relentless pursuit of understanding. In that moment, Elliot felt a surge of defiance. He would not let fear control him. "I refuse to be consumed by you," he shouted, his voice steady despite the terror that gripped him. "I will not let my desires lead me to darkness." The hungry one hesitated, its form flickering as if taken aback by his resolve. Elliot felt a rush of adrenaline as he stood his ground, refusing to back down. As he faced the creature, he realized that the true battle was not just against the hungry one, but against the darkness within himself. He had spent so long chasing knowledge that he had neglected the importance of balance and humility. The forest was a living entity, and he had to respect its power. With newfound clarity, he took a step forward, the shadows receding as he embraced the light of understanding. The disintegrating light bringing with power in the light of understanding. "I seek to learn, not to conquer," he declared, his voice echoing through the clearing. "I will honor the mysteries of this forest, but I will not let them consume me." The Hungry One's form began to shift, its hunger waning as it retreated into the shadows. The whispers faded, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of night creatures. Elliot felt a sense of liberation wash over him as he confronted the darkness and emerged stronger. With the creature retreating into the depths of the forest, Elliot took a deep breath, grounding himself in the present moment. He had faced the unknown and emerged with a newfound understanding of himself and the world around him. The tension between science and the supernatural had transformed into a powerful lesson, a reminder. As he made his way back through the forest, Elliot felt a sense of peace settle within him. The towering redwoods stood as silent witnesses to his journey, their ancient presence a reminder of the interconnectedness of all living things. He had come to Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park seeking knowledge, but he had found so much more. A deeper understanding of the balance between ambition and respect for the natural world. When he finally reached his campsite, the first light of dawn broke over the horizon, casting a warm glow over the landscape. Elliot sat by the fire, reflecting on his experience. The Hungry Ones had challenged him, forcing him to confront his own desires and fears. He had learned that the pursuit of knowledge was not just about collecting facts, but about understanding the delicate balance of life and the importance of humility in the face of the unknown. With a renewed sense of purpose, Elliot opened his field journal and began to write. He documented not only his observations of the wildlife, but also the lessons he had learned from his encounter with the Hungry Ones. The forest had tested him, but it had also shown him the way forward, a reminder that true understanding comes from respecting the mysteries of the natural world. As he packed up his gear and prepared to leave the park, Elliot felt a sense of gratitude for the experience. The journey had been challenging, but it had also been transformative. He had faced the darkness within himself and emerged with a deeper appreciation for the beauty and complexity of nature. The shadows of the Hungry Ones would always linger in his mind, but they had become a part of his journey. A reminder of the importance of balance, respect, and the pursuit of knowledge with humility. Drawing away from Jedediah Smith Redwood State Park, Elliot glanced in the rearview mirror, the towering redwoods receding behind him. He knew that the lessons he had learned would stay with him, guiding him as he continued his journey as a wildlife researcher. The world is full of mysteries waiting to be uncovered. And Lila had always found solace in nature, and this summer she decided to escape the hustle and bustle of her daily life by camping at Big Bear Lake. Nestled in the San Bernardino Mountains, the lake was known for its serene beauty, surrounded by towering pines and the gentle sounds of nature. As she drove along the winding roads leading to the campsite, excitement bubbled within her. The anticipation of exploring the great outdoors filled her with a sense of freedom and adventure. This trip was not just a getaway, it was a chance to reconnect with herself and find inspiration in the beauty of the natural world. Upon arriving at Big Bear Lake, Lila was immediately captivated by the breathtaking scenery. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the water, which sparkled like 1,000 diamonds. She could hear the soft lapping of the waves against the shore and the distant calls of birds flitting through the trees. The air was crisp and fragrant, filled with the scent of pine and wildflowers. Lila felt a rush of joy as she stepped out of her car, inhaling deeply, letting the fresh mountain air fill her lungs. This was exactly what she needed, a peaceful retreat to recharge her spirit. After setting up her tent, Lila decided to explore the area. She grabbed her camera and ventured down to the lake's edge, eager to capture the beauty that surrounded her. The water was calm, reflecting the blue sky and the lush greenery of the forest. As she snapped photos, she felt a sense of tranquility wash over her. Each click of the shutter felt like a release, a way to preserve the moment and the serenity of the place. She wandered along the shoreline, taking in the sights and sounds, feeling more alive than she had in months. As the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink, Lila returned to her campsite. She built a small fire, the crackling flames providing warmth and light as darkness settled in around her. Sitting by the fire, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The peaceful setting was a balm for her soul, a welcome escape from the stresses of her life. But as the night deepened, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. The forest, which had felt so inviting just hours before, now seemed to hold secrets in its shadows. The sounds of nature faded, replaced by an eerie silence that hung in the air. Lila glanced around, her heart racing slightly as she noticed the way the trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to her imagination, but the unease lingered at the back of her mind. She snapped back to the present moment. "Listen," she said to the trees, listening. "What is this?" It was as if the forest was alive, watching her every move. As she sat by the fire, lost in thought, Lila began to hear faint whispers carried on the wind. At first, she dismissed them as the rustling of leaves or the distant call of an animal, but the whispers grew more distinct, weaving through the trees like a haunting melody. "Lila," they seemed to call, a soft, childlike voice that sent chills down her spine. She glanced around, but there was no one there. The hairs on the back of her neck stood on end, and she felt a shiver run through her. Determined to shake off the feeling, Lila decided to turn in for the night. She crawled into her tent, the fabric providing a thin barrier between her and the outside world. As she lay in her sleeping bag, she tried to focus on the sounds of the forest, the gentle rustle of leaves, the distant hoot of an owl. But the whispers persisted, echoing in her mind. "Lila?" they called, growing louder, more insistent. Panic began to set in as she realized she was not alone. Suddenly, she heard a soft thud outside her tent, followed by the sound of small footsteps. Her heart raced as she sat up, straining to listen. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. There was no response, only the sound of her own heartbeat pounding in her ears. Gathering her courage, she unzipped the tent and peered outside, the moonlight illuminating the campsite. The fire had burned low, casting flickering shadows across the ground, but there was no one there. Just as she was about to retreat back into the safety of her tent, she caught a glimpse of something out of the corner of her eye, a small figure standing at the edge of the clearing. Lila squinted, her heart racing as she tried to make sense of what she was seeing. It was a child, no more than 6 or 7 years old, with tousled hair and a white dress that seemed to glow in the moonlight. The child stood still, staring at her with wide, innocent eyes, and Lila felt a mix of fear and curiosity wash over her. "Who are you?" Lila asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The child didn't respond, but instead took a step closer, the whispers growing louder in Lila's mind. "Lila!" the voice called again, and she felt a chill run down her spine. There was something unsettling about the child's presence, an aura of sadness that hung in the air. Lila's instincts screamed at her to run, but she felt rooted to the spot, unable to look away. As the child drew nearer, Lila could see the sadness etched on their face. "Help me," the child whispered, their voice trembling. "I'm lost!" In that moment, Lila's heart broke. The child's plea resonated deep within her, stirring memories of her own past, the loss she had experienced, the grief that had lingered like a shadow. She had come to the forest seeking solace, but now she was confronted with the pain of loss in a way she had never expected. "Why are you lost?" Lila asked, her voice softening as she knelt down to the child's level. "What happened?" The child looked down, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I can't find my way home," they replied, their voice barely above a whisper. "I've been waiting for someone to help me." Lila felt a surge of empathy wash over her. She understood the feeling of being lost, of searching for a way back to something that felt safe and familiar. In that moment, the whispers grew louder, swirling around her like a tempest. You must help her, they urged, a chorus of voices that echoed in her mind. Lila felt the weight of their words, the urgency of the child's plea pressing down on her. She had come to the forest seeking inspiration, but now she was faced with the haunting presence of a spirit in need. The emotional impact of confronting loss was overwhelming, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. She limped at her eyes. Miserable. I will help you, Lila promised, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. We'll find your way home together. The child's expression brightened, a flicker of hope shining in their eyes. Really? They asked, their voice filled with disbelief. You'll help me? Lila nodded, determination flooding her heart. She would let this child's spirit linger in the darkness. She would help them find peace. As they stood together in the moonlight, Lila felt a connection to the child that transcended the boundaries of life and death. She could sense the pain and longing that surrounded them, the weight of loss that had kept the spirit trapped in the forest. The shadows of her own grief began to surface, memories of her own struggles flooding her mind. She had lost someone dear to her, and now she understood that the child's spirit was a reflection of her own pain. A reminder that healing was a journey that required facing the darkness. Let's go, Lila said, taking the child's small hand in hers. Together they began to walk through the forest, the moonlight guiding their path. The whispers faded into the background, replaced by the gentle sounds of nature coming back to life. As they moved deeper into the woods, Lila felt a sense of purpose wash over her. She was not just helping the child, she was confronting her own grief, allowing herself to heal in the process. As they walked, the child began to share their story. I was playing by the lake, they said, their voice soft and wistful. I wanted to catch a fish, but I fell in. I couldn't find my way back. Lila listened intently, her heart aching for the child's loss. I'm so sorry, she said gently. It's okay to be scared, but you're not alone anymore. I'm here with you. The child squeezed her hand, their grip tightening as they navigated the shadows together. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the edge of the lake, the water shimmering under the moonlight. Lila paused, taking a deep breath as she looked out over the calm surface. This is where you fell in, isn't it? She asked softly. The child nodded, their expression filled with sadness. I wanted to go home, they whispered. I miss my family. Lila's heart broke at the words, the weight of loss settling heavily on her chest. She understood the longing for connection, the desire to return to a place of safety and love. Your family is waiting for you, Lila said, her voice steady. You just need to let go. The child looked up at her, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. But I'm scared, they admitted. What if they don't want me anymore? Lila knelt down, meeting the child's gaze. They will always love you, she reassured them. You are a part of them, and they will always hold you in their hearts. It's okay to let go and find peace. With a deep breath, the child nodded, a sense of understanding washing over them. I'm ready, they said, their voice filled with determination. Lila felt a surge of warmth as she held the child's hand, the connection between them stronger than ever. Together, they stepped closer to the water's edge, the moonlight illuminating the surface like a pathway to the unknown. As they stood there, Lila felt a sense of calm enveloping them. The whispers faded into silence, replaced by the gentle lapping of the waves against the shore. The child's spirit began to shimmer, their form becoming more ethereal as they prepared to cross over. Thank you for helping me, the child said, their voice filled with gratitude. I won't be lost anymore. Tears streamed down Lila's face as she watched the child's spirit begin to fade, a sense of peace washing over her. You will always be remembered, Lila whispered, her heart swelling with emotion. You are loved. With those final words, the child's spirit dissolved into the moonlight, leaving behind a sense of tranquility that filled the air. Lila stood at the water's edge, feeling a profound sense of loss and healing all at once. The encounter had been both haunting and beautiful, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of letting go. If you want to talk to the great Red Ass Autumn, find their throttle, and slide through the water to find him. As dawn broke over Big Bear Lake, Lila felt a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness that had lingered in her heart began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and healing. She had confronted her own grief through the spirit of the child, and in doing so, she had found a way to honor the memories of those she had lost. The serene setting of the lake, once a backdrop for her pain, had transformed into a place of solace and renewal. The landscape of the valley of the town she lived in, her tale still hurt, but at the same time, with the first light of day illuminating the landscape, Lila packed up her campsite, her heart full of gratitude for the experience. She had come to Big Bear Lake seeking inspiration, but she had found so much more. A connection to the past, a reminder of the importance of love and loss, and the strength to move forward. As she drove away from the lake, she glanced in the rearview mirror, the beauty of the forest receding behind her. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, carrying the spirit of the child with her as a guiding light. Claire had always been drawn to the mysteries of the natural world, and when she heard about the Allen Forest, her curiosity was piqued. Nestled in the heart of a remote region, the forest was known for its towering trees, dense underbrush, and an unsettling history that sent shivers down the spines of locals. Tales of orphaned spirits, lost souls of children who had perished in the woods, were whispered among the townsfolk, adding an air of intrigue to the already enigmatic landscape. Claire, an aspiring writer with a penchant for the supernatural, saw the forest as the perfect backdrop for her next story. She packed her gear, filled with excitement and a hint of trepidation, and set off to explore the depths of Allen Forest. As she arrived at the forest's edge, Claire was immediately struck by the beauty that surrounded her. The sunlight filtered through the thick canopy, casting a mosaic of light and shadow on the forest floor. The air was fresh and fragrant, filled with the earthy scent of moss and damp leaves. She felt a thrill of anticipation as she stepped onto the narrow trail, eager to uncover the secrets hidden within the woods. The initial excitement coursed through her veins, and she couldn't help but smile at the thought of the stories waiting to be discovered. However, as she ventured deeper into the forest, the atmosphere began to shift. The vibrant sounds of nature faded, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung in the air. Claire's heart raced as she glanced around, the towering trees now looming over her like ancient sentinels. The stories she had heard about the orphan spirits echoed in her mind, and she felt a chill run down her spine. She shook off the feeling, attributing it to her imagination, but the unease lingered, a whisper of warning that tugged at her instincts. As she continued along the trail, Claire stumbled upon a clearing that felt out of place. The ground was littered with remnants of what appeared to be a long-abandoned campsite, torn tents, broken toys, and scattered belongings that hinted at a tragic past. Her heart sank as she surveyed the scene, the weight of loss palpable in the air. It was as if the forest itself mourned the children who had once played there, their laughter now replaced by an eerie stillness. Claire knelt down to examine the items, her mind racing with questions. What had happened here? Why had these children been left behind? Suddenly, a soft rustling sound broke the silence, and Claire turned to see a figure standing at the edge of the clearing. It was a child, no more than 8 years old, with tousled hair and a tattered dress that seemed to shimmer in the dappled light. The child stood still, staring at her with wide, innocent eyes, and Claire felt a mix of fear and curiosity wash over her. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The child didn't respond, but instead took a step closer, their expression filled with longing. "Are you lost?" Claire asked, her heart aching at the sight of the child. The figure nodded slowly, their eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I can't find my friends," the child whispered, their voice barely audible. Claire felt a surge of empathy wash over her. She understood the feeling of being lost, of searching for something that felt safe and familiar. "I'll help you find them," she promised, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. As she reached out to the child, Claire felt a strange energy enveloping her, a mix of warmth and sorrow that sent shivers down her spine. The child's presence was both comforting and unsettling, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. "What happened to you?" Claire asked gently, her heart racing as she tried to understand the situation. The child looked down, their expression filled with sadness. "We were playing, but then it got dark. I can't remember where they went." The whispers of the forest grew louder, swirling around Claire like a tempest. "Help us," they urged, a chorus of voices that echoed in her mind. She felt the weight of their words, the urgency of their message pressing down on her. The emotional toll of the encounter began to settle in, and Claire realized that she was not just facing a lost child, she was confronting the spirits of those who had perished in the forest, their souls trapped in a cycle of longing and despair. Determined to uncover the truth, Claire took the child's hand, feeling a connection that transcended the boundaries of life and death. Together they began to walk through the forest, the shadows closing in around them. The trees seemed to whisper secrets, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. Claire could feel the weight of the spirits surrounding her, their presence palpable as they guided her deeper into the woods. As they walked, the child began to share their story. "We used to come here to play," they said, their voice soft and wistful. "But one day we got lost. I can't remember what happened." Claire listened intently, her heart aching for the child's loss. "It's okay to be scared," she said gently. "But you're not alone anymore. I'm here with you." The child squeezed her hand, their grip tightening as they navigated the shadows together. After what felt like an eternity, they reached a small clearing, and Claire's breath caught in her throat as she took in the sight before her. The ground was covered in flowers, vibrant and alive, a stark contrast to the darkness that surrounded them. In the center of the clearing stood a large tree, its gnarled roots twisting and turning like the memories of those who had once played beneath its branches. Claire felt a sense of peace wash over her, a reminder that even in the face of loss, beauty could still exist. "This is where we used to play," the child said, their voice filled with nostalgia. "But it's not the same anymore." Claire knelt down, her heart aching for the child's longing. "What do you want?" she asked softly. The child looked up at her, their eyes filled with sadness. "I want to go home," they whispered. "I want to see my friends again." In that moment, Claire felt the weight of the child's words settle heavily on her heart. She understood the longing for connection, the desire to return to a place of safety and love. The emotional impact of confronting loss was overwhelming, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. "I will help you," she promised, her voice steady. "We'll find your friends together." As they stood together in the clearing, Claire felt a connection to the child that transcended the boundaries of life and death. She could sense the pain and longing that surrounded them, the weight of loss that had kept the spirits trapped in the forest. The shadows of her own grief began to surface, memories of her own struggles flooding her mind. She had lost someone dear to her, and now she understood that the child's spirit was a reflection of her own pain. A reminder that healing was a journey that required facing the darkness. With a deep breath, Claire took the child's hand once more, feeling the warmth of their spirit as they began to walk back through the forest. The whispers grew softer, replaced by the gentle sounds of nature coming back to life. As they moved deeper into the woods, Claire felt a sense of purpose wash over her. She was not just helping the child, she was confronting her own grief, allowing herself to heal in the process. As they walked, the child began to share more stories of their time in the forest. "We used to play hide and seek," they said, their voice filled with nostalgia. "I always hid behind the big tree," Claire smiled, her heart aching for the innocence of childhood. "That sounds like so much fun," she replied. "I can imagine how happy you all were." The child nodded, a wistful smile crossing their face. "But then it got dark and I couldn't find them anymore." Claire felt a surge of determination as they continued their journey. "We'll find them," she reassured the child. "I promise." The shadows began to recede, the forest feeling less oppressive as they moved forward. The connection between them grew stronger, and Claire could sense the child's spirit beginning to find peace. Finally, they reached a small grove of trees, and Claire felt a sense of recognition wash over her. "This is it, isn't it?" she asked, her heart racing. The child nodded, their eyes wide with hope. "Yes, this is where we played." Claire knelt down, her heart swelling with emotion as she looked around. "Can you feel them?" she asked softly. "Your friends are here with you." The child's expression brightened, and Claire felt a rush of warmth enveloping them. The whispers of the forest grew louder, a chorus of voices that echoed in her mind. "Help us," they urged, a reminder of the spirits that lingered in the shadows. Claire closed her eyes, focusing on the energy surrounding her. She could feel the presence of the orphan spirits, their longing for connection palpable in the air. "Your friends are waiting for you," Claire said gently, her voice steady. "You just need to let go." The child looked up at her, uncertainty flickering in their eyes. "But I'm scared," they admitted. "What if they don't want me anymore?" Claire knelt down, meeting the child's gaze. "They will always love you," she reassured them. "You are a part of them, and they will always hold you in their hearts. It's okay to let go and find peace." With a deep breath, the child nodded, a sense of understanding washing over them. "I'm ready," they said, their voice filled with determination. Claire felt a surge of warmth as she held the child's hand, the connection between them stronger than ever. Together they stepped closer to the grove, the moonlight illuminating the space like a pathway to the unknown. As they stood there, Claire felt a sense of calm enveloping them. The whispers faded into silence, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of night creatures. The child's spirit began to shimmer, their form becoming more ethereal as they prepared to cross over. "Thank you for helping me," the child said, their voice filled with gratitude. "I won't be lost anymore." Tears streamed down Claire's face as she watched the child's spirit begin to fade, a sense of peace washing over her. "You will always be remembered," Claire whispered, her heart swelling with emotion. "You are loved." With those final words, the child's spirit dissolved into the moonlight, leaving behind a sense of tranquility that filled the air. Claire stood in the grove, feeling a profound sense of loss and healing all at once. The encounter had been both haunting and beautiful, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of letting go. As dawn broke over the Allen Forest, Claire felt a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness that had lingered in her heart began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and healing. She had confronted her own grief through the spirit of the child, and in doing so, she had found a way to honor the memories of those she had lost. The serene setting of the grove, once a backdrop for her pain, had transformed into a place of solace and renewal. With the first light of day illuminating the landscape, Claire packed up her gear, her heart full of gratitude for the experience. She had come to the Allen Forest seeking inspiration, but she had found so much more. A connection to the past, a reminder of the importance of love and loss, and the strength to move forward. As she drove away from the forest, she glanced in the rearview mirror, the beauty of the trees receding behind her. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, carrying the spirit of the child with her as a guiding light. Jack had always been drawn to places steeped in history, especially those with a hint of the supernatural. When he heard about Devil's Gate Dam, a structure known for its eerie atmosphere and dark past, his curiosity was piqued. The dam, built in the early 1900s, had a reputation for being haunted, with tales of strange occurrences and unexplained phenomena surrounding it. Local legends spoke of an entity that lurked in the shadows, a spirit tied to the dam's tragic history. Intrigued by the stories, Jack decided to visit the dam, eager to uncover its secrets and perhaps capture some ghostly encounters on camera. As he approached Devil's Gate Dam, the atmosphere shifted dramatically. The road leading to the dam was flanked by dense trees, their gnarled branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air grew heavy with an unsettling silence, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves. Jack parked his car and stepped out, the chill in the air sending a shiver down his spine. The dam loomed ahead, its massive concrete structure casting a long shadow over the landscape. It felt as if the dam itself was watching him, a silent guardian of the secrets it held. The history of Devil's Gate Dam was as dark as the shadows that surrounded it. Built to control the flow of the river, the dam had been the site of numerous accidents over the years. Workers had perished during its construction, and tales of their restless spirits haunted the area. Jack felt a mix of excitement and trepidation as he approached the dam, the story swirling in his mind. He had come seeking adventure, but the weight of the dam's history pressed down on him, filling him with a sense of foreboding. As he stepped closer, Jack noticed the water below the dam was unnaturally still, reflecting the gray sky above like a mirror. The surface was so calm that it seemed almost otherworldly, devoid of life. He pulled out his camera, eager to document the scene, but as he began to take pictures, he felt an inexplicable chill wash over him. The air grew colder, and he could sense a presence lurking just beyond his line of sight. He shook off the feeling, attributing it to nerves, but the unease lingered, gnawing at the edges of his mind. Jack decided to explore the area around the dam, hoping to find more clues about its history. He wandered along the crumbling pathways, the sound of his footsteps echoing in the silence. The further he ventured, the more he felt the weight of the dam's history pressing down on him. The trees seemed to close in around him, their branches casting long shadows that danced in the fading light. He could almost hear whispers carried on the wind, faint and indistinct, but filled with a sense of urgency. As he rounded a corner, Jack stumbled upon an old maintenance shed, its door hanging ajar. Curiosity piqued. He pushed the door open, the creaking sound echoing in the stillness. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the scent of decay. Old tools lay scattered on the floor, remnants of a time long past. Jack felt a chill run down his spine as he stepped inside, the darkness enveloping him like a shroud. He raised his camera, snapping photos of the eerie interior, but as he did, he felt a sudden rush of cold air sweep through the shed. The temperature dropped dramatically, and Jack's breath became visible in the air. He turned, heart racing, as he sensed a presence behind him. The shadows seemed to shift, coalescing into a figure that flickered at the edge of his vision. Panic surged within him as he stumbled back, the camera slipping from his hands and crashing to the ground. "Who's there?" he called out, his voice trembling. But there was no response, only the oppressive silence that filled the shed. As he backed away, Jack felt a wave of dread wash over him. The figure began to take shape, a translucent form that hovered in the corner of the shed. It was a man, his features indistinct but his expression filled with sorrow. Jack's heart raced as he realized he was face to face with the entity tied to the dam's tragic history. The stories had been true. He was not alone. The man's eyes bore into him, filled with a deep sadness that sent chills down Jack's spine. "Help me," the spirit whispered, the words barely audible but filled with desperation. Jack felt a surge of empathy wash over him, but fear gripped his heart. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice shaking. The spirit pointed toward the dam, and Jack felt an overwhelming urge to understand. "You need to leave this place," the spirit urged, its voice echoing in the stillness. "It's not safe." Jack's mind raced as he tried to process the encounter. The psychological horror of facing the unknown weighed heavily on him. He had come seeking adventure, but now he was confronted with the very essence of fear and despair. The spirit's presence was both haunting and compelling, a reminder of the lives lost in the pursuit of progress. Jack felt the weight of the dam's history pressing down on him, the consequences of curiosity becoming painfully clear. "I can't leave," Jack said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I need to know what happened here." The spirit's expression shifted, a flicker of anguish crossing its face. "You don't understand," it replied, its voice filled with urgency. "The dam holds secrets that should remain buried. You must turn back before it's too late." Jack felt a surge of defiance rise within him. He had always believed in the power of knowledge, but now he was faced with a reality that defied explanation. As the spirit began to fade, Jack felt a sense of desperation wash over him. "Wait," he called out, reaching for the figure. "Please tell me what happened." but the spirit dissolved into the shadows, leaving Jack alone in the dimly lit shed. The whispers returned, swirling around him like a tempest, urging him to leave. "You cannot escape," they chanted, a chilling reminder of the fate that awaited those who dared to uncover the secrets of Devil's Gate Dam. Panic surged within him as he stumbled back outside, the weight of the encounter pressing down on him. The dam loomed ahead, its massive structure casting a long shadow over the landscape. Jack felt a sense of dread wash over him as he approached the edge, the water below dark and foreboding. The stories of the orphan spirits echoed in his mind, and he realized that he was not just facing the unknown. He was confronting the darkness within himself. And, as he stood at the edge of the dam, Jack felt the weight of his choices pressing down on him. He had come seeking answers, but now he was confronted with the consequences of his curiosity. The dam was a reminder of the lives lost in the pursuit of progress, a testament to the darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface. He could feel the spirits watching him, their presence a constant reminder of the dangers that lurked in the shadows. With a surge of determination, Jack turned away from the dam, the whispers fading into the background. He had faced the darkness and emerged with a newfound understanding of himself and the world around him. The encounter with the spirit had forced him to confront his own fears, to acknowledge the pain and loss that had shaped his life. He had come to Devil's Gate Dam seeking knowledge. But he had found so much more. A deeper understanding of the balance between curiosity and respect. The unknown. As he made his way back to his car, Jack felt a sense of peace settle within him. The towering trees stood as silent witnesses to his journey, their ancient presence a reminder of the interconnectedness of all living things. He had faced the darkness and emerged stronger, ready to embrace the challenges that lay ahead. The consequences of his curiosity had led him to a deeper understanding of the world. And driving away from Devil's Gate Dam, Jack glanced in the rearview mirror, the massive structure receding behind him. He knew that the journey was far from over, but he felt ready to embrace whatever adventures awaited him. The whispers of the spirits would linger in his mind, but they had become a part of his journey. A reminder of the importance of respecting the mysteries of the natural world. With a deep breath, he set his sights on the road ahead, ready to face the unknown with newfound courage and understanding. Emily had always been drawn to the tranquility of nature, and Lake Hemet was a place she had longed to visit for years. Nestled in the San Jacinto Mountains, the lake was known for its stunning beauty, surrounded by towering pines and the gentle sounds of water lapping against the shore. As she drove along the winding roads leading to the lake, excitement bubbled within her. This trip was meant to be a peaceful escape, a chance to recharge her spirit and find inspiration for her art. Little did she know that the serene setting would soon become the backdrop for a haunting experience that would forever change her. On arriving at Lake Hemet, Emily was immediately captivated by the picturesque scenery. The sun hung high in the sky, casting a warm golden glow over the water, which sparkled like 1,000 diamonds. She stepped out of her car, inhaling deeply, letting the fresh mountain air fill her lungs. The scent of pine and earth enveloped her, and she felt a rush of joy as she took in the beauty surrounding her. This was exactly what she needed. A peaceful retreat to escape the chaos of her everyday life. After setting up her campsite, Emily decided to explore the area. She grabbed her sketchbook and headed down to the lake's edge, eager to capture the beauty that surrounded her. The water was calm, reflecting the blue sky and the lush greenery of the forest. As she sketched, she felt a sense of tranquility wash over her. Each stroke of her pencil felt liberating, a release of the pent-up emotions she had been carrying. She lost herself in the process, the world around her fading away as she immersed herself in her art. However, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the lake, Emily sensed a shift in the atmosphere. The once comforting sounds of nature began to fade, replaced by an unsettling silence that hung in the air. She glanced around, her heart racing slightly as she noticed the way the trees loomed overhead, their branches swaying gently in the breeze. A chill ran down her spine and she shook off the feeling, attributing it to fatigue. After all, she was here to relax and find inspiration, not to dwell on the eerie tales she had heard about the lake. As night fell, Emily built a small fire, its flickering flames providing warmth and light as the darkness settled in around her. Sitting by the fire, she felt a deep sense of contentment. The peaceful setting was a balm for her soul, a welcome escape from the stresses of her life. She roasted marshmallows and made s'mores, savoring the simple pleasures of camping. But as the night deepened, an unsettling feeling began to creep in. The forest, which had felt so inviting just hours before, now seemed to hold secrets in its shadows. The fire crackled, casting flickering shadows that danced around her campsite, and Emily felt a growing sense of unease. She glanced around, her instincts screaming that she was not alone. The stories of Lake Hemet's haunted past echoed in her mind. Tales of a young boy who had drowned in the lake many years ago, his spirit said to linger in the waters, searching for solace. Suddenly, a soft splash broke the silence, and Emily's heart raced. She turned toward the lake, her breath catching in her throat, as she saw a figure standing at the water's edge. It was a boy, no older than 10, with tousled hair and a pale face that glowed in the moonlight. He stood still, staring at her with wide, innocent eyes, and Emily felt a mix of fear and curiosity wash over her. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling slightly. The boy didn't respond, but instead took a step closer, his expression filled with longing. "Are you okay?" Emily asked, her heart aching at the sight of the child. The boy nodded slowly, but there was a sadness in his eyes that sent chills down her spine. "I'm looking for my boat," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Emily felt a surge of empathy wash over her. She understood the feeling of loss, of searching for something that felt safe and familiar. "I'll help you find it," she promised, her voice steady despite the fear that gripped her. As she approached the water's edge, Emily felt a strange energy enveloping her, a mix of warmth and sorrow that sent shivers down her spine. The boy's presence was both comforting and unsettling, and she couldn't shake the feeling that something was deeply wrong. "What happened to you?" Emily asked gently, her heart racing as she tried to understand the situation. The boy looked down, his expression filled with sadness. "I fell in," he replied, his voice trembling. "I can't find my way back." In that moment, Emily felt the weight of the boy's words settle heavily on her heart. She understood the longing for connection, the desire to return to a place of safety and love. The emotional impact of confronting loss was overwhelming, and she felt tears prick at her eyes. "I will help you," she promised, her voice steady. "We'll find your boat together." As they stood together at the water's edge, Emily felt a connection to the boy that transcended the boundaries of life and death. She could sense the pain and longing that surrounded him, the weight of loss that had kept his spirit trapped in the lake. The shadows of her own grief began to surface, memories of her own struggles flooding her mind. She had lost someone dear to her, and now she understood that the boy's spirit was a reflection of her own pain, a reminder that healing was a journey that required facing the darkness. With a deep breath, Emily took the boy's hand, feeling the warmth of his spirit as they began to walk along the shoreline. The moonlight illuminated their path, casting a silvery glow over the water. As they moved deeper into the woods, Emily felt a sense of purpose wash over her. She was not just helping the boy, she was confronting her own grief, allowing herself to heal in the process. As they walked, the boy began to share more stories of his time at the lake. "I used to come here with my friends," he said, his voice filled with nostalgia. "We would play by the water and fish for hours." Emily listened intently, her heart aching for the boy's lost childhood. "That sounds wonderful," she replied softly. "I can imagine how happy you all were." The boy nodded, a wistful smile crossing his face. "But then I fell in and I couldn't find them anymore." Emily felt a surge of determination as they continued their journey. "We'll find your boat," she reassured the boy. "I promise." The shadows began to recede, the lake feeling less oppressive as they moved forward. The connection between them grew stronger, and Emily could sense the boy's spirit beginning to find peace. Finally, they reached a small cove, and Emily felt a sense of recognition wash over her. "This is where you used to play, isn't it?" she asked, her heart racing. The boy nodded, his eyes wide with hope. "Yes, this is where we fished." Emily knelt down, her heart swelling with emotion as she looked around. "Can you feel them?" she asked softly. "Your friends are here with you." The boy's expression brightened, and Emily felt a rush of warmth enveloping them. The whispers of the lake grew louder, a chorus of voices that echoed in her mind. "Help us," they urged, a reminder of the spirits that lingered in the shadows. Emily closed her eyes, focusing on the energy surrounding her. She could feel the presence of the drowned boy's spirit, his longing for connection palpable in the air. "Your friends are waiting for you," Emily said gently, her voice steady. "You just need to let go." The boy looked up at her, uncertainty flickering in his eyes. "But I'm scared," he admitted. "What if they don't want me anymore?" Emily knelt down, meeting the boy's gaze. "They will always love you," she reassured him. "You are a part of them, and they will always hold you in their hearts. It's okay to let go and find peace." With a deep breath, the boy nodded, a sense of understanding washing over him. "I'm ready," he said, his voice filled with determination. Emily felt a surge of warmth as she held the boy's hand, the connection between them stronger than ever. Together, they stepped closer to the water's edge, the moonlight illuminating the surface like a pathway to the unknown. As they stood there, Emily felt a sense of calm enveloping them. The whispers faded into silence, replaced by the gentle rustle of leaves and the distant call of night creatures. The boy's spirit began to shimmer, his form becoming more ethereal as he prepared to cross over. "Thank you for helping me," the boy said, his voice filled with gratitude. "I won't be lost anymore." Tears streamed down Emily's face as she watched the boy's spirit begin to fade, a sense of peace washing over her. "You will always be remembered," Emily whispered, her heart swelling with emotion. "You are loved." With those final words, the boy's spirit dissolved into the moonlight, leaving behind a sense of tranquility that filled the air. Emily stood at the water's edge, feeling a profound sense of loss and healing all at once. The encounter had been both haunting and beautiful, a reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of letting go. As dawn broke over Lake Hemet, Emily felt a renewed sense of purpose. The darkness that had lingered in her heart began to lift, replaced by a sense of hope and healing. She had confronted her own grief through the spirit of the boy, and in doing so, she had found a way to honor the memories of those she had lost. The serene setting of the lake, once a backdrop for her pain, had transformed into a place of solace and renewal. With the first light of day illuminating the landscape, Emily packed up her campsite, her heart full of gratitude for the experience. She had come to Lake Hemet seeking inspiration, but she had found so much more. A connection to the past, a reminder of the importance of love and loss and the strength to move forward. As she drove away from the lake, she glanced in the rearview mirror, the beauty of the water receding behind her. She knew that the journey was far from over, but she felt ready to embrace whatever lay ahead, carrying the spirit of the boy with her as a guiding light. As we conclude this exploration of chilling camping experiences, we encourage you to take a moment to reflect on your own encounters with the unknown. Have you ever felt a strange presence while camping? Have you heard whispers in the wind or felt the weight of history in a particular place? Nature is filled with stories waiting to be uncovered, and your experiences may hold the key to understanding the mysteries that surround us. If you enjoyed this video and want to hear more chilling tales from the great outdoors, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. By subscribing, you'll stay updated on our latest content, including more spine-tingling stories, explorations of haunted locations, and discussions about the supernatural. Don't forget to like this video and share it with your friends who might also be intrigued by the mysteries of nature. Together we can create a community that embraces the unknown and shares our experiences in the wild.